That's right. For the vast amount of human history, women have been made to feel invisible, as if they did not matter. Today in Opening Government, we're very proud to break through that veil, because we say it is only through the creation of feminist icons are you able to actually break those barriers that fundamentally limit the capacity of women to actually become more prominent in society. We ultimately say that this debate is about why should this be great for the feminist movement and how it impacts them. We say the creation of the feminist movement entails maximizing the creation of these feminist icons ultimately leads to allowing women to maximize their participation within society, and that is a good thing. So what kind of icons are we talking about? We're not limiting icons to a particular country. We say we want icons from all over the world. We're talking about, and from all of the fields, right? Taylor Swift for music, Ronda Rousey for fighting, Hillary Clinton for politics, Marie Curie for science even, right? We're talking about people like Malala Yousafzai, even Laverne Cox, who identify as women and are transgendered. We say these icons are incredibly important, not only for women, but for people who identify as women, particularly transgendered women. We also talk about Malala Yousafzai because since we're from Pakistan, we absolutely love her, and we say that she is great, right? So what exactly do we bring to you from Opening Government? We'll first tell you that what exactly is the problem that exists when we talk about women being more prominent in society, and how the creation of feminist icon fundamentally changes that. We'll also talk about how this has an impact on a vast amount of female issues and how it is only made available through the feminist movement. Lastly, we're going to have a talk about how this change ultimately trickles down in places where you need feminism the most, particularly the developing world. I'll take you in a second, and a bit about intersectionality and how it allows us to create better allies and make our movement more prominent, more powerful. But before that, yes.
Okay, yeah. Can you clarify what exactly is a feminist icon? Is it just a woman who is in a special position, or do they have to do something particular for feminism? So how distinguish you those women?
Okay, we think that feminist icons are created either by them achieving prominence within society on their own, for example, they become celebrities, or by people giving them some sort of importance, right? Ultimately, the idea of an icon is somebody who has a cult following. It may be developed organically or something that they did. It may be a position that they were born into, but ultimately, if they believe in the ideals of feminism and if they want to progress women issues, they're feminist icons, and they also need to at times identify with the feminist movement. The name that we've mentioned are particularly these women, and we think this is incredibly important, right? So what exactly is the problem in status quo? We think that the media is incredibly saturated at this point in time, right? A lot of women don't even get access. The number of times that women have to listen and view things from a man's perspective, because often they're not given that access where they can actually get their views posited, is far greater within society today, right? What do these icons ultimately do? Ultimately, these icons break down those barriers and allow for people to identify with them. We give you particularly the example of Emma Watson, who's a self-identified feminist who, using her influence as one of the most prominent Harry Potter actresses, was able to progress the movement by going for the he for she movement, right? Why is this particularly important? Because we think that her social capital and her unique position gives her access to an audience which does not currently exist in the status quo. So the comparative that these guys have to engage with, what is the other way by which we can make feminism more accessible to a vast amount of people who are clearly not interested in feminism to begin with? We say the fact that Emma Watson has particular capital within society ultimately means that her influence makes her message or the feminist message more available to larger society, and we say that is an ultimate good thing. But how does this exactly happen? Because often these feminist icons have a large amount of fans, right? Particularly, we give you the example of Ronda Rousey. This is a field which is dominated by men, like the UFC, where you have sexist men who watch it because they're interesting. But the coming in of Ronda Rousey ultimately meant that just because you're a man, that doesn't make you a great fighter. You can be a woman and become an incredibly strong fighter, right? So a vast amount of society, which was sexist to begin with, is able to now see Ronda Rousey in a position where she is literally kicking ass and is doing a great job at it. And we were like, we are afraid of that woman, and we don't think that her femininity limits her ability to be a great fighter, right? We think this is an incredibly important thing that you only exclusively find in our world, right? Because she has vast amount of followers, because people watch it, which does not really happen in their part of the world to begin with, right? We also say that the responsibility of the feminist movement is to make feminism as accessible as possible to get people. Why is this important? Because if you don't have people who are listening to the feminist movement or to your ideals, or not able to identify with your wider goals, you're not able to create that impact. These feminist icons ultimately are able to break down those barriers and have a positive impact on female issues in general, right? So how exactly does this impact trickle down in what fields? We say firstly, sexuality. We think having like feminist icons who are assertive about their female sexuality is a particularly good thing, because now you have these icons who are in an sexist society and showing that we can be independent actors. We can be positive in terms of approaching men, and we do not have to be limited by Victorian notions of what it meant to actually go to a person, right? We think this comes in our world. Go, quickly.
Yeah, who do you think gets more visibility in the media? Emma Watson, who adheres to sexual norms, or Audre Lorde, who does not?
Okay, we think ultimately you need to have multiple feminist icons, right? You have to engage with the larger comparative. Is there any other way by which you can make feminism accessible? Even if Emma Watson gets like a lot more attention than the person that you just mentioned, we ultimately say that the fact that you can now compare the two, and the fact that you can realize that there is somebody who I should understand is able to only pivot off when you have a feminist icon in the first place, so you can then critique the fact that somebody is getting an inordinate amount of attention, right? So yes, we do understand there's a problem with white feminism, but you are only able to point that out when you have a feminist icon to begin with. The critique is only made possible when you have prominence, when you have visibility, and that happens in our world. For education, Malala Yousafzai is great. For transgender rights particularly, we think this is incredibly important, because when you have feminist icons, transgenders who are fundamentally excluded from society, considered lesser people, are ultimately able to identify with Laverne Cox, which does not happen in any other world, right? Which raises greater awareness that maybe there are other ways by which you can view transgender people, right? Ultimately, in their world, there was no way that transgender issues were being addressed. In our world, they are being addressed. This is incredibly important. We say that the change ultimately trickles down in multiple ways. Often these people have a lot of influence and they have a lot of fans, right? The way it trickles down is, even if people don't understand what feminism is, like in countries like Pakistan, when you're watching or listening to Taylor Swift songs, you ultimately are like, yeah, like women can be great. And you consume their material, and implicitly you start agreeing with those assumptions. Like, until Malala became a feminist icon, we did not understand that there were issues particularly to women in education. Education used to be considered a general problem, but Malala becoming an icon pointed out that there are particular things that you need to resolve, right? We think this is a good thing. Why is this ultimately great for intersectionality? This is incredibly important, right? Because we think that more debate within the movement is fundamental. The reason why some people will get a lot of attention, some people won't, is because of power structures. But those structures are only challenged when these people become prominent, and we give you that in our world. And that only happens when you have positive feminist icons. The fact that I did not know about feminism, and the fact that I was only able to learn about it through these icons, ultimately means that these feminists are not only good for men, these feminists are good for the movement, these feminists are able to raise a lot of awareness, and we think that is a great thing. We are very proud to stand in proposition.
Speaker for his remarks. Now I'd like to welcome up the Leader of the Opposition.
It is true that women for large parts of our history have been invisible. But they are not that invisible anymore, right? And he admits that the Albany government admits that right now women are in quite popular positions. Hillary Clinton, Angela Merkel, we see those women all over again. These women, however, are not women that are like necessarily feminist icons, and they're perceived as especially feminist, right? Angela Merkel is not seen as a feminist icon because she's not a part of the feminist movement. So besides that, so women are not that invisible, so they're very visible anymore. They have like positions of power right now. People are accepting that, and even in countries where this is not the case, we say that the idea of feminism is much more important than the icons of feminism, because the icons can be very, very harmful to a lot of these countries. If we see, for example, that Rihanna is also a feminist. In that regard, and that this is this kind of Western feminism is much more broad in the media, much more likely to be perceived. And these kind of sexualized images that you see and this kind of feminism is very harmful, especially given that a lot of followers over the in the feminist things. And then it's very harmful to these societies when they see this. So in my speech, I want to talk about 2 points. I want to talk about what feminism actually is about and what we want to achieve in our side of the house, and why it's actually harmful that if there is large culture and icons that people are following. So firstly then, what is feminism about? We say feminism is firstly about independence, right? Not only from men, like being able to be equally accepted, being able to do what you as a person want to achieve in your life, but not only that, you also want to be independent from society as a whole, because you not like women have not been only oppressed by men. It's also that there are some women that favor, for example, I don't know, that this kind of subordination, or that say okay, women should do the household, right? So that's on both sides. Or women that say that even like men shouldn't have female characteristics, right? For example, to cry or something. So we see that we should reach a level of independence, and secondly, we should reach a level where you can choose, every person can choose different identities, right? Different character traits. So that women can be either no thank you, can be either traditionally female, or they can be in a position of leadership, they can be very strong, they can be very hard line, right? We want that be able that people can choose what's best for them, and we think that's what feminism is really about. So why is this then that it is harmful, and this is my second point, to this very idea? Firstly, if you have these large icons, they have a lot of authority, they have a lot of fame, they have a lot of money, right? They have a lot of followers, which means that necessarily, once they get more followers, they get more of these things, right? Authority, more fame, and these things. And so that is perceived in society as being the only way, right? This is perceived in society, this is how feminism looks like. And we say, no thank you. We say this is very, very, very harmful. So, for example, if you see Rihanna, if you see Emma Watson, if you see a lot of these feminist icons, you see that they are very, very similar and very, very alike, right?
Okay, on that.
Why is that? Because if there's once you achieve a lot of followers, you have once a critical mass, which is then supportive of that image of feminism, right? That image is much more persistent because, for example, the media is transporting it more, because this is the area where you get more money from,
on that.
right? No, thank you. Because look at Malala, for example. She's not very perceived as a feminist, rather as a human rights activist, right? This is the essential difference.
On that.
No, thank you. No. So she perceived as how do we see that? How can we prove that Malala is just seen as a human rights activist? If you look at the followers, Malala mostly has followers who even are generally objective to the idea of modern feminism, but who are believing in basic human rights such as education, right? Such as what Malala is fighting for. So and the general followers of Malala are people that are political, that are academics, that are not really like young girls, because young girls mostly tend to favor Emma Watson because it's an image that's much closer to them.
Okay, on
okay, go ahead.
Vast majority of society is incredibly sexist. Instead of women thinking that feminism is about hating men, it is only through these icons are they able to understand the wider implications of feminism and then make their own mind on what they want to do.
I got it. I think that's perfect. The opposite is almost certainly true, right? If you see the images that for example, that Emma Watson and Rihanna are wearing, for example, the same kind of clothing, have the same kind of style. They wear a lot of makeup. They wear similar short clothes, you get the idea that feminism is about sexualizing yourself. It's about being beautiful, right? This is incredibly harmful because young girls then think this is the only way I can be a feminist, right? This is the only way I can achieve those aims of being powerful, as being not invisible, right? And therefore, we think this is constructing a norm, and it's people are in the end less independent. They cannot choose between different identities because this is an identity that is that has more followers, that is perceived as has more fame, that is more successful. For all these reasons, we are very, very proud to oppose.
Okay, I'd like to thank that speaker for his remarks, and I'd like to welcome up the Deputy Prime Minister.
With the permission of the adjudicators. So, ladies and gentlemen, side opposition comes up and talks to us about how sexualization is bad, having narratives in society are bad, and how women are already free and, well, in positions of authority, so they're visible, so we don't need feminism, because Angela Merkel is the Prime Minister, is the Chancellor of Germany. We have problems with this, right? On the first level, women in today's society are not visible, not to the entirety that we'd like them to be. Yes, Miss Merkel might be the Chancellor of Germany, and Miss Clinton might be running for the presidency of the States. However, that is not applicable across the world. There are fewer female leaders today than there are male leaders. The patriarchy is still strong. The place of women in society is still under scrutiny. The reason the feminist movement exists is because women are still subjugated in certain sections of society. The problems that women face in certain sections of society are not still looked upon seriously. Malala raises a question of education. Emma Watson raises the question of how we need to come together to ensure that we are seen as equals in society with the he for she movement, right? So the reason that these people talk about these things is because that visibility does not exist, especially in the developing world where women, and even more specifically in the developing Islamic world, where women do not have visibility, do not have traction, and do not have the ability to understand where they gain momentum from in order to bring political change, which is something I'm going to get down to when I talk about my positive case. Next was this idea of sexualization and how there's a lack of choice because there are multiple narratives. We don't believe multiple narratives bring about a lack of choice. We believe multiple narratives are important because the beliefs of, because the position of certain types of women, depending on their race, religious beliefs, and countries they come from, are different as compared to others. So a woman in Pakistan faces different problems than a woman in New York, right? So a Pakistani woman has Malala, who understands what they go through and talks about that and looks to address that and raise awareness about that. Whereas in New York, women have more different problems, more advanced problems perhaps, because in Pakistan the feminist movement is still in its infancy. Over there we need icons in order to take that momentum to the next level, right? Because what happens when we gain momentum? Because when a lot of celebrities or icons and cults of personalities start talking about these problems, right? We're not saying everybody in the world automatically agrees with them, but because these narratives are coming out, because they're becoming prominent, we saw how the he for she movement took over social media when Emma Watson made her speech, or Malala, and she is a feminist, by the way. She's written so in her book, just to clarify that from opening opposition, right? So when all these things happen, right, there is traction. When traction is gained, momentum is gained, and policy changes are easier to bring about because of the fact that there is weight behind these issues now, right? So, and we don't believe sexualization is a problem. This is extremely sexist of opening opposition to come up and say, if a woman believes that it is okay for her to wear short clothes, why not? If men are allowed to roam around without shirts, then why should women be stopped? We don't believe that these narratives should stand unchallenged, and people like Emma Watson, Malala Yousafzai, and so on and so forth do enforce the challenging of these narratives, which is something we stand by, right? So let's talk about more specifically the impacts that we're trying to create in this debate, right? So we talked about how momentum is important. Now, why do icons specifically give us this momentum, right? What is the nature of icons? Throughout human history, when movements, dissenting movements especially, have risen up, they have been led by individuals who have represented the plight of those people. These have been individuals around who their supporters have gravitated in order to push their agendas forward, right? It's democracy in microism, where communities support leaders of communities who are addressing their problems in order to get their narrative out to the broader world, right? So these icons, be it Martin Luther King, who talked about the black people's problems in America during the civil rights movement, or Rosa Parks, who did similarly, right? These are people who stand up for narratives. Now, not all narratives are the same. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King had differences in the things that they believe, right? However, that did not mean that they were not putting forward an agenda that needed to be placed in society, because they were discussing problems, right? So unless our opposition is going to come up to us and say that feminism is, that the treatment of unequal treatment of women is not a problem in society, we don't believe that their case really has any grounding, because all they've come up and said is icons are going to tell people to sexualize themselves, and that is bad, which we abhor as a sexist remark, right? So next is this idea of how yes, I'll take you.
Islamic countries. Can't Islamic fundamentalists not point to the most prominent feminist figures like Rihanna and exploit it for their cause to show that feminism is bad?
Yes, now, within developing countries, we need to understand that because the concepts of feminism are so underdeveloped at this stage in these societies, the problems start from the base. We don't believe that religious clerics watch Rihanna videos and really understand who Rihanna is and how she's impacting feminism. But when Malala Yousafzai comes up, and here's the plurality of narratives and why it's so important, and I'm going to talk about the transnational effect of it, right? When Malala starts talking about it, then it becomes more important. So Malala may be inspired by people like Emma Watson or Hillary Clinton or Angela Merkel and so on and so forth, right? However, because there's a trickle-down effect, because these people have supporters, people like Rihanna have supporters in the developing world, in Islamic states, who are not religious fundamentalists, of course, and when these people hear these narratives of feminism, it opens discourse. When this discourse is opened in society, people like Malala become more prominent, outliers who challenge societal norms become more prominent. These individuals have more grounding to take up a stance, right? Taylor Swift has a huge following in Pakistan. Because of that, when Taylor Swift talks about feminism, people also discuss feminism, right? And that starts an organic movement within these societies. And yes, clerics might be against that, but we don't believe they can defeat that purpose, right? Lastly is this idea of how we're going to bring this together in order to challenge all the problems that occurred, right? So on the first level, because these problems are now being discussed, these narratives are now being discussed, we're going to get men on our side, right? We're going to, because of the fact that discussion and multiple opinions exist, men have now more of a reason to join in the discourse, because no longer is the feminist movement seen as a man-hating movement. It's now seen as a diverse umbrella movement, which has lots of facets and lots of interesting aspects that need to be discussed, right? Which draws more people under the fold, because it has greater influence. When there was not this great influence for the feminist movement, it was seen as this man-hating movement. But when people like celebrities and icons and so on and so forth start challenging that, then more people look at these multiple narratives that are coming through and talk about them. This gathers momentum, it gathers awareness. Because we're raising awareness, because we're bringing together momentum, and that momentum is essential for some sort of policy change, because really without information and momentum, we're not going to make about a change. We are proud, oh so proud, to propose this motion.
Excuse me, ma'am. Could I go to the restroom?
Okay, I'd like to thank our speaker for their remarks. Now I'd like to welcome up to commence the case for the closing half of the debate, the government representative.
We understand that in most countries in the West, they have pretty much have helped women become more liberated. We accept to that. But the 3/4 of the world still do not even consider women to be remotely human. There are countries that absolutely do not even give women legal rights. Under those particular instances, where patriarchy actively prevents the transmutation of information from the West to the East, where the patriarchy actively prevents even women from being literate to be able to read books of feminism, to even educate themselves at this particular time, even if it would mean by behaving or mocking the ways or even mimicking the ways of the feminist icons of the West, if it would mean a marginal benefit to those women out there, we believe that this is the right way to do so. But we tell you, what will the closing tell you and distinctly tell you? Firstly, we'll prove to you how icons help the oppressed women to relate to the messages of feminism better. Secondly, we will tell you how icons help to bring about a better discourse of ideas of feminism to all part of the society, something that would have not been existing either without those icons. And thirdly, we'll tell you how icons create an inspiration for the future leaders of feminism accordingly. And within this, our rebuttals will be well integrated. Firstly, we tell you how icons help to relate message to feminism better. What do people see when they see a celebrity? They try to see how the celebrities behave. They see their lifestyle. They see how they interact with their day-to-day life. They follow it almost like a paparazzi in any way possible. When they see them, they see that how it will relate well to their own lives. They see that how they could mold their own life system better to that. We recognize that at certain particular points, there will be conservatives. For those who are very conservative, they'd rather obviously follow those particular feminist icons or leaders who are somewhat conservative to their similar shades of behavior. We understand that there are ones in the West who know that they have economic freedom and other freedoms, but for them to express their sexuality, they would be the ones who would follow Lady Gaga or Caitlyn Jenner to see how they could express their sexuality in a way they want to see and relate to. For people who are within the Islamic world, who see that because they have to go through the patriarchy, and to convince patriarchy they have to take step-by-step way, they would emulate the behavior of the ones who are within the Muslim icons, like Queen Rania of Jordan, who show an example that you could still be a modest feminist, modest Muslim person, but still be feminist enough to make sure your women are educated, your women are economically empowered. This is the way how even in Bangladeshi microcredit model, in Bangladesh we tell women that yes, you could still be religious, but at the end of the day, if you see icons out there like that, you could still be the one, even within your faith value system, you could liberate yourself. That is the way how if you behave or even if you mimic, even if it in the opening opposition's model, where they say that no, at the end of the day, this only tells people to behave in certain way of feminism, we say that it's okay to behave the way only feminism works. Because at the end of the day, in no way possible they could ever nuance the way how it could go so. We need to understand that these are the women who are not academically PhD holders. These are the women who could only get the message if by mimicking them, they could gain the utility of the feminist message as a whole. This is something significant that we see is beneficial. But we secondly tell you, how do these icons bring about a better discourse of feminism? We tell in the worst case scenario of the world of OO that people will have different camps of feminism. People will show and stand up to person A, person B, and person C and follow their shade of feminism. Even then, how it's not a bad thing necessarily, because people, when they defend their icons, they would defend and go through in every length possible. For anyone who believes in Emily Pankhurst, they will defend her in her ideological line. For people who defend other icons of their own native area, like Begum Rokeya of Bangladesh, they would defend it according to her ideology as well. When they defend it through their own particular ideology, that's where they bring about that argument that why, in my case, my icon is better than your icon, or how our icons in some way have a middle ground so that we could give our society better. In particular context of those developing countries where there is a burgeoning middle class liberal people, these are the people who are still craving a way how to integrate the Western feminism idea to their own women so that it could help shape their national narrative of feminism better. When they see that particular middle ground of different ideologies of feminism, people who may follow the camps of Rihanna, people who may follow, even if they follow the camps of other people who, like Caitlyn Jenner, even if it doesn't make any relation whatsoever, it still gives them the idea that how you could take the movement progress forward. This movement progression otherwise would have never existed, because in case of academic feminism, ultimately it all remains a part of an abstract idea. It says that yes, all women should be treated equal, but nobody knows what is that particular equality until they see that when they see CEO like Indra Nooyi of PepsiCo, where they see her to be both a mother and a CEO, corporate CEO, earning comparable income of that of her male counterparts of other Western part. That's where when they see these kind of inspiration, they could translate that to their action in their own place. So that discourse otherwise would not have happened. Even in O's model, when O tells us that it leads to bad feminism, because ultimately you'll have a bunch of people who have no idea what they're talking about. We tell you it's still good. Even if there's a bad feminism, even if we have feminism, in a worst case scenario who could be racist or homophobic or transphobic, we still see that still brings about the debate and the dialogue. This dialogue otherwise would not have had occurred, because we see that when that dialogue takes place, that's where people can either call out the closeted or homophobic feminism, or they could call out feminism whose ideas are bad and whose ideas could be stopped and not be perpetuated before it harms the masses in the lower down of the ladder. We see that tangible benefit comes out ultimately. Before I move on, opening.
So if we assume that role models are a good thing for women, can you start explaining to us why especially we need those feminist icons who are largely homogeneous, probably around the world, but at least within their regional context?
Well, even if it's within the regional context and even if they're largely homogeneous, at least even in their own feminist role model, people know that these people are different, and these are the women who are standing somewhat out of the mainstream societal dictation of the patriarchy. When they see that these women are different from the patriarchal diction of how a woman should behave, even if it's in a conservative country, or even if this feminist icon is a conservative herself, it still shows that you can choose to go through a different path and self-actualize. That's the entire utility our side closing proves to you. And thirdly, we tell you how icons of future leader of future feminism can be created better. We tell you that when the individuals see a feminist icon, they all aspire to reach their icon standard. They see that their icons have set up a groundwork upon which they would choose to work upon. When they choose to work upon those icons, they read through the life struggles of those feminist icons. When they read through and see the way how it relates to their life, seeing through this, they will choose the way of action. Last minute. That clearly tells them how their way of movement should be created. That's where they know to avoid the mistakes, and that's where they know how to reach their audiences even more effectively. And as such, the impact is ultimately that it creates strategy, it helps them to move forward. So ultimately, what does closing prove to you? Closing proves to you that ultimately we need a discourse, and ultimately with different shades of feminism can only be established. We believe that feminism should not be binary, because binary tells you that you can either be a feminist or not feminist. But in our world, we tell you you could be a feminist in any way you choose to be, and we tell you how to take that movement forward. With that, we're proud to propose. Thank you.
Welcome up the leader of the opposition.
Government is correct when they say that there are a few feminist icons who are great. Just like opposition is also correct when they say that oftentimes these icons are sexualized by the media or made to be portrayed in ways that they aren't actually as efficacious as government claims. Our role as closing in this round is to give you a mechanism to be able to weigh this and to show you why on our side of the house we're actually going to get, first of all, more feminist icons that are going to hurt the movement, and then secondly, prove specifically why these icons do in fact harm the movement. I'm going to start my speech by giving you some general context, then I'm going to move into a specific point of extension, talking about why specifically this harms the feminist movement, and finally I'm going to give you some mechanisms on how you ought weigh this round. But first on some context, right? Recognize that throughout this entire round, we've been operating under the assumption that these feminist icons are icons simply because they have a very prevalent role in the media, right? But further, we would tell you that this assumption is just simply true. This is the way that these feminist icons are able to get the high visibility the government has been banking so heavily on in this round, right? Recognizing that, let's talk specifically about which type of icon therefore happens more. We tell you that the type of icon that is going to happen more are going to be the people like Emma Watson and Taylor Swift. when we tell you, because these people are more common, they're going to have more accessibility and visibility than people like, for example, Malala, or a lot of the other examples that they've given us, or for example, like Audre Lorde. We tell you that this means that these are the type of people that will shape the perceptions of the people who are viewing these feminist icons, which means that people like Malala, for example, are going to be seen as the exception, not necessarily as the rule.
Okay.
I'll tell you why, in my second point, why this is going to be so pernicious. But first, why is this, right? Recognize that media is shaped by both production incentives and consumer action. What does this mean? We tell you that, first of all, production incentives mean that they want to produce what people will consume, which means that they need to make money, which means that they aren't necessarily concerned with promoting the best feminist icon. Instead, they're actually concerned with promoting the person like Emma Watson, who happens to have fame not because she's a feminist, but because she happens to have starred in a very popular movie as Hermione. We tell you that this means that they're going to not do many, like, for example, pieces that highlight the specific actions that someone who may not otherwise be in the media, like, for example, Audre Lorde, who happens to be a leading feminist theorist, we tell you that these type of people are not the ones who are actually going to get nearly as much media attention, because there just simply isn't the production incentive to promote these people. Secondly, we tell you that this is further warranted by the second way that we figure out what media shows, which is by the consumer the consumer incentives, right? Recognize that we tell you that there are several ways in which people are able to consume media. Or we tell you there's two ways people consume media. They consume it first, largely because they want to be entertained, which means that I'm not going to watch something that's entertaining, which means that, again, the media has an incentive to do something that's going to be entertaining to me, which means that they aren't going to do a piece that specifically focuses on, like, the importance of why this person is a feminist icon and on the intersectionalities of the feminist movement, which means that you get a much less nuanced movement. But secondly, we tell you that the other way that people watch entertainment is that they watch it, or that people interact with media, is they interact with it casually. Which means that the discourse that CG banks so heavily on, and most of GovBench banks heavily on, just simply won't happen. Why is this? We tell you that this is because when people watch casually, they are not watching to find their next cause or their next big thing, which means that you aren't going to get most of these benefits and impacts that government talks about. But we tell you even further, and even more pernicious for government side, is that when people watch these and interact with media casually, they're much more likely to actually internalize the negative ways that the media is likely to portray these women, even if they are focusing on, like, even if they are saying that they are a feminist. What do I mean by this? I mean that this means that people are much more likely to pick up on the outfit that Taylor Swift is wearing, or the fact that Taylor Swift is white and not a person of color, rather than they are any of the nuances that they think are going to drive this discussion. Conversely, we tell you that on our side of that, or conversely, we tell you that the people who are actually going to realize these nuances and actually start this type of discourse that they talk about are the ones that are already doing this in the status quo, which means that they aren't benefiting at all from these icons. We tell you that these are the type of people who are able to say, look, there are women in powerful positions. Look to example like Hillary Clinton. She doesn't necessarily have to be a feminist. We can just say, look, women are highly capable. They are acting in the goals of the feminist movement. We think that this is sufficient enough to get most of the benefits while getting rid of the harm. So let's now talk specifically about how this does harm the feminist movement, right? But before this, I'll take top half.
For Audre Lorde to get prominence, you first need to have different feminist icons so that they can be critiqued.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you why that's not true right now. Harms of the feminist movement. We tell you that this is why more prevalent women, who are the type who are going to be portrayed by the media, which is what I just warranted to you, or why they are going to harm this movement, right? We tell you that the feminist movement has three distinct goals. We tell you first, they want to preserve their quality, right? The feminist movement, if they're able to if everyone all of a sudden becomes a feminist, that's great, except for the fact that now, because we're all feminists, there isn't any efficacy within the movement, which means that the movement doesn't ever actually achieve anything. This means that you aren't able to actually get any of the policy outcomes that you've talked about, which means that you've actually gained absolutely nothing. So the quality of the movement is incredibly important. Why is the quality of the movement diluted on their side of the house? We tell you that, first of all, the feminist movement is already highly critiqued for not taking into account things like intersectionality and being a diverse movement. We tell you that now it's even worse on their side of the house when the media promotes icons who are going to be predominantly white, straight, cis, good-looking. We tell you that this is not the type. We tell you that this means that this is just going to further the image that the feminist movement is necessarily only open to these types of people. This is really bad. But we tell you that further, we tell you that these icons, because they're predominantly in the media first and foremost, and oftentimes they aren't even feminist first and foremost. First and foremost, they are a music artist or some other type of person or celebrity. They're going to necessarily dilute the message of the feminist movement because they need to appeal to the masses. We tell you this appeal to the mass is not what you actually need, because we tell you that it is more important to preserve the quantity. But secondly, we tell you that the second goal of the movement is, we tell you to increase opportunity, which means that, which is to open up this movement to more people. We tell you that the problem is on their side of the house. They are strictly defining who participates. The media, because of the incentive that I already gave you, is going to necessarily promote the women who are going to conform to most of the norms that society already operates under, which means that now you're going to specifically be turning people away from your movement. This is really bad. The third thing that the feminist movement is concerned with is accessibility. I think this clashes directly with the points that we've heard out of closing government, right? Recognize that these icons are not necessarily, very often going to be women who are able to talk about the experience of oppressed women. We tell you that this is going to give a very westernized conception of what the feminist movement actually is, which means that women of other cultures aren't going to feel like they're open or able to interact with this movement. This is especially problematic because it further closes an already very closed movement. Finally, how should you weigh this round? We tell you that you weigh this round on if it's able, or on how many people it affects. We tell you that we're able to get a better movement on our side of the house that is able to, in the long run, affect more people because it isn't diluted and it isn't closed out to more people. Secondly, we tell you that you weigh this round based on how the impacts are hard to see. My partner will talk more about this as he weighs this round in his speech. For all these reasons, proud to propose.
Okay, I'd like to thank that speaker for her speech. Now I'd like to welcome up the government whip to conclude the debate for the government side.
I think both sides in this particular debate concede to one particular concept, is that the fact that we need individuals to be able to advocate for women's rights across the entirety of the world. We're not only referring to the communities of the West where women already have a lot of traction, but we're also referring to a lot of conservative societies where women don't have traction. In our world, we tell you that the presence of these feminist icons and the fan following that they have in their particular societies are able to give these movements traction and are able to pass on the message to a greater number of people, which would have been otherwise impossible. From the opposition to win this particular debate, they need to show us how, in absence of these feminist icons, that particular end goal of greater advocacy for women and how you can reach across to all spectrums of women in all of the different societies can still be reached. From the closing opposition, we have absolutely no idea how this is going to happen. The opposition whip needs to provide us a really good idea of how this is going to happen, but we probably suspect this is going to be very late into the debate. From the opening opposition, the only idea that we do get is how academic feminism is going to empower these particular women and is somehow going to reach women in all sorts of societies. Shadman has already told you how these individuals subscribe to a very few women who are mostly educated already and who are already aware of their rights, and the discourse remains constrained within this particular societies, usually referring to higher social stratas where women already have some bit of traction. However, this academic discourse never really passes down to the lower social stratas, perhaps in a very rural village of Bangladesh, where women absolutely have no idea idea what they wish to do and are still oppressed by the patriarchal community, which tells them that they should be confined within their households, which tells them that it's not okay to go and independently seek out their jobs and lead an independent life away from any male attraction. But then the closing opposition tells us that the creations of icons is ultimately problematic because the quality of the movement is diluted and certain women will not be able to interact. But Shadman already told you how there are different forms of icons that are created, not only television personalities who are singers and actresses. We tell you that these individuals are also authors, respected personalities in the academic sphere. We openly, publicly come forward with their own views and ideas which cater to different forms of societies. They tell you that these particular woman icons may not have everything in common. They might have differences in opinion and they might have different fan bases in society. We tell you that's absolutely all right, because only when you have the presence of these different fan bases in society, when you have an interaction between these fan bases where individuals, where different communities interact and either come to a discussion or come to a conclusion regarding how the status of women should be in society, or find many grounds of commonality where they can essentially find a middle ground. The idea that there's maybe some similarity to what Taylor Swift is talking about, and even what Queen Rania in Jordan is talking about. That is essentially the liberty of women and the idea that she can do whatever they want. However, the closing opposition further tells us that individuals will only be able to relate to the superficial aspects as to how these individuals dress and what they need to wear. We tell you that firstly that doesn't happen. People always relate to a lot of other things as to how women can have jobs, can have a significant amount of independence and do whatever she wants. But even more importantly, even if it's just the dress that individuals are relating to, we tell you this means a lot to people who are living in societies which still tell them what to wear and how to behave in front of their woman. When these individuals realize that certain female icons are able to dress openly and however they wish to dress themselves and have complete control over their appearance and how they project themselves in society and are able to better self-identify themselves, we tell you it gives the ability to individuals who never thought that was possible. It gives individuals down the lower stratas of society who were always the idea that they can dress however they want, that it's okay to have multiple sexual relationships with different men, that it's okay to not be confined within the traditional values of society. We tell you that there are also women who will tell you that you can still conform to traditional values of Islam and be a very modest Muslim woman and still be a feminist. But even more importantly, Shadman tells you about how feminist icons can also be male personalities who can tell you that I claim myself to be a feminist. This essentially breaks the stereotypical idea that a feminist can only be a woman advocating for her own rights. This can essentially add an entire spectrum of new individuals. For instance, males who thought that they had absolutely no idea whatsoever what feminism was about. Now that they can identify that we equally have a responsibility towards garnering and protecting the rights of women, and that's important too. Under their world, all of these things disappear, and in our world, at least individuals can follow and have certain bits of inspiration as to what to do and how to project their lives. Closing.
Yeah, most people simply can't access feminist scholarship. Can you explain to me how an oppressed woman living in a developing country benefits at all from seeing Taylor Swift dance on TV?
Oh, because when she sees Taylor Swift dance on TV, she realizes that she can also be a television personality and not someone who cooks in the kitchen all for the entirety of her life. But when she also sees that Hermione Granger is a graduate of Brown University, she also realizes that she can go to college and complete her education and still do whatever she can want with her life. The idea is that these women need to be aware of the fact that they are the ones who are in complete control of their lives, and these celebrities or female icons, no matter which spectrum of society that they come from, that can pass on this value to individuals, and that's what's ultimately important. We tell you values, no matter how they come from or what kind of values they are never objectively bad. We're absolutely okay with different values perpetuating in society. be it ultra-liberal, be it ultra-conservative. We tell you this culture shock is extremely important. Shadman told you about this, how individuals may suddenly find it extremely awkward to find a woman who is covering her head on TV and calling herself a feminist, such as Malala Yousafzai, but how she can still be a role model to advance women's rights in Pakistan, in the rural villages where girls at less than the age of 10 never thought that they had a right to go to school on their own, can now actively see Malala Yousafzai and realize that their life shouldn't be something that confined to their individual households, and how they can advance in society as they wish. At the end of this day, closing government wins this debate because we're able to tell you how this discourse happens because individuals protect their own icons and you find commonalities and compatibilities, or even in the worst case scenario when you don't find compatibilities, you have an idea as to what feminism should be. But at the end of the day, this opens doors for all sorts of individuals to be able to be part of the discourse and actively work together cohesively to advance women's rights, which we believe is very, very important. Thank you.
Yep.
You're right. If you need to leave at all, feel free. Especially if you need to cross somewhere.
It's all right.
Yeah. If you do need to leave, feel free. You don't need to ask permission or anything. Just head out. It's no problem. Okay, I'd like to thank that speaker for their remarks. Now I'd like to welcome up the opposition whip to close the debate for the opposition bench and indeed the debate as a whole.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'd like to begin this last speech of our round by adding some clarity. I think it is important to understand that on opposition bench today, nobody has said that women cannot be feminists, that men cannot be feminists, and we are simply not saying that a world where there were no powerful women would be better. That is a ridiculous argument to make in any world, which is why we haven't done so. What we are talking about in this round is what is actually better for the feminist movement as a whole. What I'm going to do now, and in this speech, is give you 2 points of clarity, I guess, describing what the feminist movement is and the role of icons, because that has been contested, and secondly, talk about how this harms the collective ability of the unique aspects of the feminist movement to actually achieve the ends that they desire in society, and secondly, talk about the number of people affected, because we believe that that is a very important mechanism through which this round should be viewed. First, what is the feminist movement? OG tells you that the feminist movement should care about participation. OO tells you that it should care about independence, and I think we also get this conception that it should care about getting rid of the gender binary. I think these are all valid conceptions because the feminist movement is multifaceted, and that is the understanding that we bring you on closing opposition, because we recognize that there are different parts and different aspects of the feminist movement simply because many people have different lived experiences. This is a key conception because a white individual in society is often likely to have a different lived experience than a black individual or a Middle Eastern individual in that society. I think the feminist movement as a whole, and this is our understanding here, best works when you do not alienate or harms the goals of one set of women, regardless of where they are in the world, in order to prop up or even support, if you get benefits from their half of the room, the benefits of some individuals in society. We prefer the quality in this regard, which is the weightiness that you get out of my partner. Secondly, then, let's be clear about what the role of icons is in this round. OO tells you that these feminist icons are often all the same. Think pop leaders. I think OG sufficiently deals with this when they point out there are, in fact, other icons like Malaya. What we tell you, and what is rather clear here, is that I do not intend to contest that these women are invalid actors in society because we think that they do make many benefits. What we tell you on closing, though, which deals with this argumentation, is that these are not the women who will get the most clarity and airtime in society simply because of the way that the media functions and simply because of the way that popular discourse functions. What we tell you is that, in addition, what we have is this these women in power, these women like Taylor Swift and like the pop singers that we get out of the opening, are often inclined to moderate their understandings of feminism in order to appeal to the masses of individuals in society to which they derive their economic power from, because they are all individually profit motivated. We think that they do not want to get rid of supporters by taking too harsh of a stance in many instances. What we think this does is twofold. First, it creates a very homogenous type of feminism that is actually being portrayed to the vast majority of individuals throughout the world, because the media always selects the same type of individual to portray in their coverage, and because those individuals always gain the most power because of the power structures that the world still operates under. And secondly, I think, as my partner talks about, it creates a very diluted type of understanding of feminism that is not complex, that is simply talking about one lived experience and like one set of understandings of what feminism should be. I'll take closing.
Sir, at least in our world, these women icons have some media attention as to no media attention at all in your world. But even more importantly, media is always there to provide new sort of ideas because they can't simply live with the same role models on and on again, which is why you have different sorts of icons such as Malala Yousafzai and Queen Rania coming forward despite Taylor Swift and Rihanna taking most of the space.
I do wish that the media was inclined to portray a new person every day, but you, sir, must be experiencing a very different media than I do, because what I see is the media doing what works and what will get them the most ad revenue, and that is simply portraying these same women. I think that is rather clear. Let me then talk about how this harms the collective ability of these different feminist groups to succeed, because what we get out of closing government today is this conception that we need discourse. We agree on closing opposition, but tell you that the discourse that we need is not one that subjugates certain classes of women, because we think there is an inability to identify with Taylor Swift for the vast majority of individuals in society who we should care about. Countries are less likely to embrace specific types of regional feminism because they simply see this one type being portrayed through the cult of personality that is largely overwhelming of Taylor Swift, for example. I think this is evidenced by the fact that many Middle Eastern feminist groups, for example, care more about collectively moving forward towards a system of equality, while many American white feminists care about more the individual conception and that individual representation. I think secondly, many black feminists would feel excluded when you're simply portraying this type and class of individual on the screens. What we have is this very diluted and homogenous type of feminism that I just previously described in my point being put out to society. So what does this get us in addition to this casual conception? I think what we have is a feminist world where certain feminist organizations can achieve success perhaps by drawing individuals because they can now see Taylor Swift identify as a feminist and therefore identify as a feminist themselves. But in societies where they do not have the lived experiences to identify with Taylor Swift and often feel excluded from Taylor Swift, they simply are excluded from feminism because you dilute the ability of that regional feminist group to actually access the members of that society by portraying a type of feminism that would be more regionally appropriate. I do not think it is appropriate to force one solid conception of feminism down everybody's throats, and that is what we tell you government is inherently doing in this round. I think this is exacerbated, especially at the point where this academic scholarship is not necessarily greatly extended to many different parts of the world, because while you may see Taylor Swift or whoever it is on television, you will have this casual conception of what they are actually representing. You may just take in that they are wearing a dress. Interestingly, closing government tells you that this is very important, but they do not warrant this understanding because they rely on the assumption that these individuals in developing nations or wherever, they do not have this conception of feminism to the same degree as America, for example, or other nations. They assume that you can relate to these individuals on screen to a great ability. We tell you that is simply not true. How many people will then be affected because we think this is important? OG tells you that you can identify, but you're only allowing a small group of people to actually identify with these individuals. They then tell you that you can have discussion of negatives by example, but I think this only occurs in academia rather than in the world in which we actually live. They then tell you that this gives access to other feminists to gain voices, but the cult of personality necessarily excludes other voices because it monopolizes the discussion. I think CG then says, how can you still reach women? I think we allow feminist groups to reach women by actually giving them ability to make gains in the regions where that feminist group is most appropriate, which allows the collective feminist identity of the world to advance. What we give you on closing is this conception of advancement that does not have a singular perspective of feminism. Because of this nuance, we are very proud to oppose.
I think that's because of their remarks, and indeed I'd like